Yogah Karmasu Kaushalam.
Hello friends, this is Professor Neelam Panchal from Gujarat University and I welcome you all in this session on functions of management. Friends, management is an activity consisting of processes that are mainly concerned with the important task of the goal achievement. No business enterprise can achieve its objective until all the members of the organization work in a planned and integrated way. Therefore, the process of management involves the determination of the objectives and putting them into action. According to G.R. Terry, management is a distinct process consisting of planning, organizing, actuating and controlling performed to determine and accomplish stated objectives by use of human beings and other resources. Management is considered as a continuing activity which involves planning, organizing, staffing, directing and controlling. So, if you look into the management, that the managers must perform all these functions to achieve the desired organizational goals. Now, let us see the objectives of the session. The objectives of the sessions are to describe the concepts of organizational systems and their components and management, to identify the major functions of the management for the organization, to see how administration is different than the management, to analyze the processes associated with the performance of the major management functions and to explain the roles and responsibilities of the managers in any organization. Friends, as you go about the business of living, you find that you are surrounded by the organizations of different kinds, big and small, formal and informal, economic and religious, government and private, educational and cultural, social and political and so on. So, you belong at the same time to many of these groups. At any rate, your life and living are largely influenced, even conditioned by these organizations and their work. So, many a time you will find that you are negotiating with one or more of these organizations and are adjusting with the ways in which they work to find your own space and establish your own identity. We know from the beginning of the history that even early groups of the human beings had grown into the complex organizations, the tribes, the religions, the army, the empires and the merchants also. Today also, in the diverse organizations, they are interwoven with a complex tapestry in which you and the other members of these organizations are bonded more and more closely together, without perhaps fully realizing it. Satellite communication networks now link people through a meticulously organized system which has its own protocol, code of conduct and patterns of interaction. All these are the outcomes of the organization, which is in simplest form a structured process in which people interact with one another for fulfilling specific objectives. Now, the definition of the organization sometimes may seem very simple, but in a complex organization there are countless interactions at various levels among the large numbers of the people. For example, in a university there are students, teachers, deans, heads, administrators, accountants, laboratory technicians and the janitors and the estate managers, canteen workers and the support staff and so on. Now, while all of them are working for the purpose of the university, each one of them is working towards fulfilling the objectives, that is the personal purpose as well as the organizational purpose. Some of these purposes are noble and idealistic, some are very practical, some are supporting and reinforcing others, while some might conflict with others. However, all of them contribute to the purpose of the university, and therefore each of these objectives, the ways in which they are sought to be achieved, are all organically related to the university's organization. It is this relationship of several elements that constitute the structure of an organization, which we generally call a system. In other words, a system is defined as the aggregate of several interrelated components, that is called subsystems, which have been put together according to a specific scheme or plan and to achieve stated objectives. A system has different components, which involves several parts or subsystems, which when put together in a specific manner from the whole system. Boundaries within which each part exists. A specific goal or goals expressed in terms of performing a task, producing an output or providing a service, and so on. Close interrelationship and interdependence among the different subsystems. The interrelationship among the subsystems can be identified in different terms, which includes the flows that exist between them, such as the flow of information, materials, money, and so on. The structure within which they relate to each other, the procedures by which the subsystems relate to one another, the feedback and the control process and mechanisms that exist to ensure that the system is moving towards the desired objectives. Now, let us understand the management and the functions and the interrelationships. So, management is about directing the energies and resources of the organization to purposeful, coordinated and purposeful activities. The functions of the managers including policy making, planning, organizing, motivating, communicating, monitoring and controlling, and so on. Now, these managerial functions are same regardless of the type of organization or the level of managers in the organization. Let us say an example of the Vice Chancellor of the university or the Dean of a faculty or the Registrar. They are all performing these functions in the same manner as does the President of the manufacturing company and the marketing manager of its products or the Secretary of the company. Now, there would be of course differences in the style as the purposes of the university and the purposes of the organization, they are vastly different from that of the manufacturing or the other organization, but the substance of the managerial functions would be the same. Let us understand the differences and the correlations that exist over here. So, let us look into the administration and management. Friends, before we get into the management theories and the practices, it is worthwhile to understand the two concepts, administration and management. Early thinking was that administration involved thinking, a top level function that focused on the determination of the objectives of the enterprise, its plans and the policies. Now, this view was held by some early writers like Oliver Sheldon in 1923, William Spiegel and Ernest Davies in 1952 and G.E. Millward in 1960. According to them, the management had more to do with doing than thinking, and at the top level, more time is spent on the administrative activity. As one moves down in the organization, more time is spent on the management activity. Another view held by E.F.L. Bridge and others in 1972, which considered management as a comprehensive generic term that included the entire process of planning, organizing, directing, controlling, and so on. So, administration according to them was the only part of the management comprising of the functions of the planning and control. They made a distinction between the administrative management and the operations management also. According to Peter Drucker in 1970, the basic difference between the management and administration is the use of the terms in difficult and different contexts. The governance of the non-business institutions is called administration, while the governance of the business enterprise is called management. In other words, the chief domain in the management is the economic performance, while in the administration, the economic consequences are only secondary. Now, let's look into the leadership and creativity. Friends, the success of every organization depends upon its leadership. So, organizations, as we said earlier also, they are the groups of the people who are brought together for a common purpose. The attainment of that purpose depends on how the groups are held together and how they are motivated, how their efforts are channelized, and so on. Transforming the desire of achievement into a burning passion for the successful accomplishment is what the skillful leadership can do. According to Peter Drucker in 1970, leadership is the lifting of man's visions to higher heights, the raising of the man's performance to higher standards, and the building of the man's personality beyond its normal limitations. In short, leadership is the ability to secure the desirable actions from a group of followers voluntarily without the use of coercion, or the ability to persuade others to seek defined objectives willingly and enthusiastically. Creativity, on the other hand, it involves the application of person's mental ability and imaginativeness to some area, leading to the creation or discovery of something new as a result. The something new here, it could be just a theory, a product, or a process, a better reporting system, or an improved version of something that already exists. The creative process is the manifestation of a fundamental ability that of relating previously unrelated things and the ability to look at the things with a fresh eye. Creativity in any field is stimulated by an inward motivation to contribute, by challenging current goals and the practices, by reshaping the existing organization climate and a culture, and by the sense of satisfaction that a person derives from his or her work. A typical example of creativity in an organization is the problem-solving approach, which is widely understood and accepted as a creative process. The underlying assumption of the approach is that if you can define the problem, the solution will be quick to follow. So, the elements involved in this process are collecting the facts, analyzing them, identifying the problem, consider the alternative solutions, selecting the best solution, and putting the selected problems to end. Friends, now let us look into the planning and the process. Planning is an intellectual process that requires the managers to think before acting. Thinking in advance about what, when, and how to do the things and by whom is at the core of the planning. All the organizations have a purpose, and it is that purpose which has brought the people who constitute the organization together in the first place. As the organizations embark upon their journey in achieving their purpose, it might become necessary to review and redefine the purpose itself from time to time. In that process, the new visions might emerge, new goals will be set, and the new ways of reaching the goals will be identified. In the list of the management function, planning is at the top and controlling is at the bottom. But the two together, because the plans can be effectively executed only if there are good controls that help you to measure the achievements at distinct stages as you proceed to achieving what you have set out to accomplish. Planning determines where the organization is going and what approaches it will adopt to get there. The purpose of planning is to coordinate the activities within the organization to attain the stated objectives. unplanned activities often tend to be sporadic, disjointed, disoriented, and therefore disorientation happens. Planning, on the other hand, brings a higher degree of rationality and order into the organization's working. What happens in such situations is that a revised plan is put in place before the old if it is required and one is fully conducted. In other words, when the existing plans become obsolete or its goal becomes unworthy of pursuit, a new plan with a new goal is put in place, and this process of midway corrections and renewals is what makes planning a dynamic process. If a plan does not disclose any modifications, it is a bad plan. So remember that when you are planning, there should be a flexibility. So flexibility is therefore an essential feature of any good plan. Planning minimizing the risk and uncertainties. It focuses attention on the organization's goals, it leads to the success, and it facilitates the control. Now let's look into organizing and coordinating. Friends, organizing is a major management function after planning, and it involves determining the specific activities that are necessary to accomplish the organization's goals, grouping these activities into a logic pattern, framework or structure, assigning the activities to the specific positions and people. The planning process have identified the organization goals and strategies to achieve them, and the objective definition would have clearly indicated what to do, and the strategy would have spelled out how to do, and in operational terms this what and how it will have to be formulated into a specific set of activities that can be assigned to people for implementing them. So, structuring the organization is very important. Having identifying the activities, it is important to group them into different sections of operations to ensure the efficiency. It is here that the structure of the organization assumes significance. Some essential features of the structured organization includes an organizational chart which depicts the road map showing the structure of authority and accountability, relationships, activities, and the communication channels. It indicates how the affairs of the organization are to be planned, directed, and controlled. It helps each other of the organization understand his or her role, responsibilities, and relationships, as well as the boundaries within which he or she will have to operate. It endeavors to evolve objective criteria for the measurement of the results in terms of the goals achieved, and the facilitates communication of the data and instructions vertically and horizontally. It represents certain order lines in the conduct of the affairs of an organization. In structuring the organization, certain basic principles must be kept in mind. For example, activities must be grouped and assigned to appropriate organizational sessions. So, the criteria of the grouping also include creation of the separate organizational sessions only if the functions proposed to be assigned to them are logically separable. Every session that you are taking in the organization should work towards a common objective or a major function that can be identified with the organization. It should be possible to justify a separate session in terms of the span of control or reach of the management, that is optimum number of employees, and accountability relationships within the session. One major purpose of an organizational chart is to indicate the structure of the authority, power, responsibility, and accountability in the organization. While the chart will only show the flow of these attributes and their connecting links, the effectiveness in the organizational functioning requires clear definition of the responsibility assigned to every person, delegation of the appropriate authority that matches the responsibility, clarity about the reporting relationships, and levels of authority and consistency about reporting relationships and the nature of assigned responsibilities. Next is principles in organizing. Friends, we have just talked about the several new concepts like accounting, authority, delegation, power, relationships, responsibility, and so on. It will be in order if we pause for a moment and reflect on these concepts so that they can be appreciated from the perspective of the organizing function and organizational structure. Authority and power are often understood to be same, but two can be clearly differentiated. Authority is the right to do something, while power, on the other hand, is the ability to do something. So, from the organization's point of view, authority is the right that a manager must ask or require a subordinate to do something to accomplish the goals of the organization. In exercising this right, he or she also assumes the power to cause the subordinates to do what he or she wishes them to do, since he or she has the ability to reward or punish them. There can be situations in which a manager has the authority to do something but does not have power to get it done. And so, the responsibility is related to both authority and power. It means the obligation to do something in the organizational context. Responsibility means the duty that one must perform the function, task, or assignment given to him or her. So, in that sense, everybody in the organization has a responsibility, as without that responsibility, there is no reason for him or her to be in the organization in the first place. On the other hand, friends, delegation of authority and power, it is the process by which in an organization the senior management gives their juniors the authority to do certain things. When that happens, the person to whom the authority is delegated can perform all the functions and exercise all the powers as though they are in fact vested in him or her. So, in the absence of such delegation, accomplishment of organizational goals cannot take place, as the top manager has the personally intervene in the performance of every little task. On the other hand, the manager cannot delegate totally all the authority for performing the managerial functions of planning, organizing, controlling, communicating, and so on. So, to delegate the complete authority in all these areas would mean that the manager is abdicating his or her responsibility. The next part here is a leading and motivating. Friends, Peter Drucker said, management is doing the right thing. Leadership is doing the right thing. Though leadership and the management often overlap, the two are not the same. Management is about achieving a goal efficiently, and the leadership is about establishing the desired goals. So, leadership is a management style. It is the ability to inspire the people to do what the leaders want them to do. It is an inspirational and a personal. It inspires cooperation and action based on loyalty and often unquestioning obedience. So, a good manager does not have to be an inspirational type, but he or she ought to have some leadership qualities and a positive personality that wants to get things done. He or she should conduct himself or herself with a purpose and confidence and should be result oriented. His or her job is to guide, to direct, to influence, and even demand actions. A good manager is an analytical person who is driven by the goals set for him. He or she is not just the presiding deity of the group, but is leading a group somewhere, talking them along to attain a purpose, even as he or she is thinking of a new goal, new purpose for tomorrow. A manager need not to be charismatic person to inspire people to perform and attain higher levels of achievement. He or she will nevertheless must get the things done through the people and see that they work efficiently and produce the results that are beneficial to the organization. Friends, motivation is all about the task of getting the people to do the organizational task efficiently and effectively. There is a whole body of literature on behavioral theories and the patterns, and this is not the place to make a comprehensive survey of the theories and the principles, but here we can mention few examples in which how the managers motivate the people. First, there is the carrot or a stick approach. The carrot or stick approach suggests positive motivation, also known as anxiety reducing motivation. It offers a person something he or she considers valuable. It may be pay rise, praise, promotion for the superior performance. And the negative motivation is called the stick approach. So, it uses or threatens to use the punishments like reprimands, removal, reduction in the rank for the unsatisfactory performance. This approach is also known as the reward and punishment theory, which influences behavioral patterns. Maslow's theory of human motivation in 1960 makes two important propositions about the human behavior. One is, man is a wanting being. He always wants and wants more. And secondly, a satisfied need is not a motivator of behavior. According to Maslow, what man wants depends upon what he already has. So, when one need is satisfied, another appears in its place, and this process is unending. It is only the unsatisfied need that motivates the behavior. It is a significant lesson for the managers who set about the task of motivating people. A vibrant, dynamic management style would seek to carry all the members of the organization together in achieving the organization's objectives. The more conventional reward and a punishment or a stimulus and a response theories are now giving way to the newer styles of the organizational management. Friends, participatory management, team building, decentralized structured and autonomous management, project-based management, result-based management. These are all the examples of the evolving management styles. Now, let us look into controlling. So, control supports planning in two ways. First, it helps review current goals and strategies, and while doing so, draws attention to situations that requires new planning exercises. And second, it provides a useful and a necessary inputs upon which the new plans can be based. So, controlling, as we said earlier also, it comes to an end of the list of the management functions because it is concerned with comparing events with the plans, making corrections when the events deviated from the plans. So, both these concerns reflect an end of the event appraisal of all that went into the pursuit of attaining a specific goal and an assessment of what did indeed happen as against what was expected to happen. So, if there are departures, then the corrections follow. Franklin G. Murray in 1964, he described the controlling function because of the misunderstanding between giving work assignment to men and carrying them out. So, get reports of what is being done, compare it with what ought to be done and do something about if the two are not the same. And that is controlling. So, controlling is a part of the manager's job in which he or she checks up on assignments, he sees what is being done, compares it with what was expected to be done and does what is needed to correct the deviations if any. Planning is a prerequisite for the effective controlling. Without planning, there is no predetermined explicit understanding of the desired performance, and without such understanding, controlling becomes ineffective. When the managers try to control the organizations which do not have adequate planning, confusion and the chaos results because pronouncements of the unsatisfactory performance in the absence of the desired performance standard agreed upon by all the concerned would surely lead to resentment and a dissatisfaction among the members of the organization. Friends, the main purpose of accounting is to provide the data to assess the controlling in business or the other economic enterprises. For example, the budgets of the organizations indicate the levels of the desired performance. Now, the accounting staff recorded data from the actual operations and at regular intervals, the summary of these data is compared with the budgeted levels and corrective action is taken where needed. Now, after understanding all these functionalities of the management, let me summarize the session. Friends, in this session, we have tried to take you to the basics of the management as a profession and its concepts and practices. We begin with a study of the anatomy of an organization, what its component systems are, how each of these subsystems supports and strengthen each other, and how all of them together make for the life of the organization which attains the specific goals. We then moved in the session to take a close look at the sample diet on the organization's leave and what their bread and butter tasks are. And with this understanding of the core functions of the management, we tried to explore the methods and the practices that management of the organizations follow in the performance of their functions. We have tried to understand all the basics, all the functionalities of the management over here, and in the next session, we would try to look into it in detail. I hope you are clear with all the fundamentals and I hope you like the session. Thank you.